This is the 18th part in a 30-part series giving an ecological overview of the insect orders. This video will be looking at bark and book-lice within the order Socoptera, which today are considered part of the larger order Socodea with the sucking and chewing lice. But for the purposes of this order list, I've decided to separate the two, simply because they're separated by over 100 million years of evolution. Not because they're actually within distinct orders. The order name Socodea derives its name from the Greek word sokos, which means rubbed or gnawed, referring to their distinct feeding method of scraping and siphoning. The Socodea are all very passive insects that don't do anything in the way of hunting. They are detritivores that show up often in loose subsocial congregations on their food items of choice, namely bark or books. These are grazing animals. Book-lice feed on molds and fungi found in homes, and in the wild it's usually in caves. Book-lice and bark-lice possess specialized scraping mouthparts to effectively collect foodstuffs, but different groups are adapted to eating different things. Book-lice feed on molds and fungi found in homes, whereas bark-lice typically feed on algae, lichen, fungus, and detritus, but they typically are only feeding on surface-level biofilms. Unlike the parasitic lice, book and bark lice possess flight depending on their species. And even more interestingly, and somewhat uniquely, these guys can have different morphs with different sized wings depending on how they need to fly from area to area. That is, long distance or short distance with long and short wings accordingly. Let's look at the book lice. Book lice are common in some homes, and they eat microscopic fungi and molds that grow on plant and animal-based materials. They also feed on starches, yeasts, whole grains, pollen, algae, lichen, and occasionally dead insects, feathers, or hair. They won't actually eat the objects themselves, but the living biofilm on top of the objects. Some species exhibit parthenogenesis, meaning females can reproduce without mating, which I discussed in my previous episodes on stick insects and aphids. Book lice are primarily found indoors in warm, damp, and undisturbed areas. Some common habitats include old books and papers, damp basements, crawl spaces in bathrooms, leaky plumbing, overwatered houseplants, in stored food products, and plaster and drywall. Outdoors, they are found in similar dark, damp niches, such as caves, forest crevices, and similar environments. These insects are small, often colorless, and difficult to tell apart across species. They can complete their life cycle in under 30 days and lay their eggs in small clusters. Dry environments kill them quickly, and their presence can actually indicate moisture problems in buildings. Of all the lice, even the sucking lice, they are very temporally and food-specific grazers. Now let's look at the bark lice. The bark lice are found outdoors and do much the same thing as book lice, only they do it on trees and plants, usually out on the open. These guys often form massive grazing colonies where they move about trees somewhat like sheep across a field. I say massive, but these guys are quite small and are considered micrograzers that capitalize on biofilms, performing essential cleanup in a narrow niche. When they're found on plants, they're actually not dangerous to them, and potentially beneficial as they consume the biofilm and not the plant tissue itself, thus being in a very differentiated niche. They feed on algae, lichens, fungi and molds, pollen, decaying plant material, and sometimes fragments of dead insects, or rather the biofilm on top. They're commonly found outdoors on tree bark, leaves of trees and shrubs, under loose tree bark or stones, and in leaf litter. Some species produce extensive silken webs that cover sections of tree trunks or branches, creating a silken sheath, which they work together to produce. They produce this from their labial glands and not spinnerets, meaning the way they produce silk evolved in an independent way from Lepidoptera, among other insects. Unlike the other forms of lice, bark-lice will often use these silk shields either individually to protect their young or communally to protect themselves. They're not social creatures so much, and they only congregate for the same reason sheep do: safety in numbers. That being said, the bark-lice and the book-lice are underrated and deceptively interesting animals. They aren't particularly well studied, but there is a decent amount to know about them, and I implore you to do your own research and give these guys the love they deserve. That being said, thanks for watching this episode of Privileged Bug Facts. Stay tuned for more bug content just like this. Thanks.